So part two, Trev, is we do this every week. We talk about what's at stake for Notre Dame in this game. And there's the obvious one. Oh, they can be national champions. All right, cool. We got that. But what would it mean for Notre Dame? And we'll talk a little bit about what it would mean for Ohio State also at the end, but we're going to focus obviously on Notre Dame because we're a Notre Dame channel. But what would this game mean for Notre Dame? And I think there's a lot of different layers to this. And the biggest one is we talked about before is this puts Notre Dame on the level of the premier teams of college football. And what we mean by that is if we're talking history, Notre Dame is in the top group. It's Notre Dame, it's Alabama, it's Michigan, and it's Ohio State. That is the four cream of the crop, top board blue bloods, and it's not really close. There's nobody else that is really, in my opinion, in that group. With all due respect to Oklahoma, could maybe make a case, in my opinion, based on national championship numbers. I mean, Texas is a blue blood, but they're not on the same level as Notre Dame. And they're not on the same level as Alabama and programs like that. I mean, they have 4 claimed to national titles, right? I mean, and they're just, to me, they're not there right now. I think Oklahoma's got 7. Like Texas has got 4 claimed titles and 5 unclaimed titles. They don't even have 10 total, where Oklahoma has 17, 7 claimed, 10 unclaimed national titles. And then you look at Alabama claims a national title every year. So somehow, some way they're going to claim a title every year. They have 18 claimed titles, 5 unclaimed national titles. Ohio State has 8 claimed titles, 7 unclaimed titles. Michigan has 12 claimed titles. Now, all but 2 of those came before 1950, but that's a different conversation for a different day. And then obviously Notre Dame, has their 11 claimed national titles, and they have 11 unclaimed national titles as well. So I think those are the 4 blue bloods at the top of the list, and obviously Notre Dame and Ohio State are part of that. So I'm not talking about being considered one of the elite teams in that regard. That's just kind of – I'm talking about right now, in this modern era, Notre Dame is not an elite program. They're not. They've been very good. But they've played for the title. This is the 4th time they've played for the title in the last 15 years. They played for the title in 2012. They played for the title in 2018. And when I mean play for the title is you're getting into the 14 playoff. You've got a shot to win the title. If you don't, you don't have a shot. They had a shot to win in 2020, but they got blown out in the title game in 2012. They got blown out in the semifinals in 2018. They got blown out in the semifinals in 2020. And so here now it's like, okay, yeah, you're getting to this stage, but until you truly win one, you're not, in my opinion, considered a truly elite program. They're definitely have put themselves on top of the tier 2 right now. And I would even argue that there's a case to be made that if Notre Dame loses a close game, they've kind of proven they're in tier 1. I don't necessarily know that I'm as accepting of that fact, because I think you need at least to have won a title to argue that. Like, you could argue that Clemson still belongs in there because they did win a title 6 years ago and then another one 8 years ago. So that's kind of where I'm at, Trev. But I think a win clearly lets the college football world know that Notre Dame is a true force to be reckoned with in this modern era of college football. Not just because they won the championship, but the why they won the championship, which I'll discuss here in a little bit.
I think a win in the national championship completely busts the door down, right? But I do believe that a win over Georgia kind of cracked it open a little bit. You know what I mean? Because that was the first postseason win 2 bowl games ago that Notre Dame got that kind of started to put people on notice. You talked about it earlier in the show that, there were some people that doubted Notre Dame's ability to beat IU. The majority of a lot of pundits believe that Georgia was still, look, they had their issues. They were playing with a backup quarterback, but Georgia's still Georgia. Kirby Smart is still Kirby Smart. And Notre Dame hasn't given people a reason to believe that they can win that game, which is fair. Like, that is a fair, like, in my lifetime, the reason why I was so juiced up about Notre Dame beating Georgia in the Sugar Bowl is because I've been alive for 27 and a half years. Right. And now it was to the point where I had not seen it in my lifetime. So I had no leg to stand on to say, well, they should be considered up there, because I don't really know, because they
have the best helmets in college football.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so
No, you have to use the Brian Kelly. Well, hey,
Yeah.
we lost to Alabama by fewer points than Ohio State lost to
Right.
Alabama. We lost to Clemson by fewer points than Alabama lost to Clemson. I mean, that's literally the only argument you can make, and I
Yeah.
hate that argument.
Yep. Me
It's
too.
like a Notre Dame fan, and especially a Notre Dame head coach should never make that argument to somehow prop his team up. You
Yeah.
lost.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's by 1 or by 27, you lost.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was, for the longest time, it was like, like Notre Dame was that kid that would like brag about how they waited in line to get into the party, but never got into the party. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, I was there on the outside. Like, like that's that's kind
like
of how
Rudy
it was.
running around the stadium trying to get in, like jumping around looking for tickets, like never got in, but he wanted to be there.
Right. He was at the stadium. He just didn't get a seat inside.
Right.
And as silly as it sounds, like that's kind of how it was for Notre Dame over the span of my lifetime. They reached the national championship in 2012. They played in multiple New Year's Six bowls. They played in 2 playoff games, but it was never there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so this opportunity now that Notre Dame has in front of them, they can bust the door wide open. And it's no longer are they there? They're there. The question then turns from are they there to how long can they remain there? You know what I mean? Which is a great position to be in, because you could have everybody's goal is to set up a dynasty like what Nick Saban had at Alabama, which is another reason why this national championship has so many good narratives about it, because you have 2 teams now that are looking to establish their dominance and set up their dynasty within college football. Because I'd make the argument that it's up for the taking, right? Last year, Georgia won the national championship in 21 and 22, but they were held out of the playoffs last year, and they were bounced out of the playoffs this year by Notre Dame by 13 points. And Alabama's not where it's at right now as it was with Nick Saban. I still have a lot of faith in Kalen DeBoer. That's a topic for the offseason.
Right.
But, now as far as building a perennial powerhouse, building a dynasty, that is up for debate. And so I think Notre Dame and Ohio State each have the opportunity now to cement themselves and build a really strong foundation to who is going to have that next one, right? Is it finally going to be Ryan Day? I think he's in his 6th year as a head coach, but is it going to be Ryan Day? Okay. Is it going to be Ryan Day in his 6 years? Is it going to be Marcus Freeman in the illustrious, storied 3rd year? Like, you know what I mean? And so all of those things kind of feed into it, but I don't think that there's any doubt about it. A win here for Notre Dame in the national championship, not only does it open the door, because I think it's cracked a little bit, but it blows the door wide open. And now everybody can confidently say, hey, Notre Dame is there. How long can they stay up top? Which is a lot of fun to be talking about, man.
Well, here's a couple other things as well, Trevor. I mean, this is going to be a win would be huge for the school. I mean, we've talked about this before. Money is going to pour in if Notre Dame wins it happens. It's same is true for this is one of those things that's true for both teams. Is money always pours in from donors, and you can go through all the years. They'll talk about how applications are up. I don't know. Do schools still charge for applications now? It used to be a big thing when applications would go up. It'd be huge because you used to have to like pay $20 to have an application.
Depends on the school when I was applying.
So if there are schools that still charge application fees, and I don't know who does or doesn't do that anymore, but there's all types of things that go into this where just more people come to the campus, more people go to the bookstore, buy stuff, more people, ticket prices are going to go up. That's an unfortunate side effect, but I think we'll all accept that if it means winning a title. So, when I was in school, you had to pay for application fees, but that was a long time ago. I had some guy, I was on a show today earlier today, and he was talking about how, I don't know if you're old enough to remember this. And I'm like, bless your heart for thinking that I'm younger than you, but thank you for that. But that's the other thing. But here's another aspect of this, Trevor, that is a big picture aspect to Notre Dame winning. Because again, if they win, they're the national champs, and you get all the perks that go with being the national champs in the present. But we're talking about sort of the big picture aspects of what's at stake for Notre Dame. If Notre Dame wins a title, their extension for the TV deal was only 3 years. Or was it 5 years? 5 years. They're going to, if they're kind of building something, and if they win this game, I think it was So 3 years what meant they'd have it in 5, or it was 5 on addition. I can't remember which one it was. But anyway, the point is their TV contract comes up before any of the other conferences' TV contracts comes up. This was the brilliance of the move from Jack Swarbrick and Pete Bavacqua, who both worked on this. Instead of signing a new long-term deal with anyone, while the SEC's negotiating a new deal, while the Big Ten is negotiating a new deal, while the college football playoff is negotiating new deals, Notre Dame said, we're going to take a big pay raise, but we're going to push off the big one for, and I know it's 5 years. I just don't know if it's a 3-year extension on top of 2 left, or if it was a 5-year extension. I think it was 3 on top of what was remaining on the deal, because their TV contract, I think, was meant to expire after this year or after next year. I can't remember which one it is. I'll have to go back and look it up. I should know that. But the point is, it comes up soon, and there will be no conferences in negotiations for a deal. Notre Dame winning a championship. I mean, a big reason why Notre Dame got the NBC deal back in, was it 91, was because of the 88 national title and the fact that Notre Dame became the team during that year. It was Notre Dame, Miami, and Colorado were the 3 best teams of college football during that 3-year stretch leading up to that. With all due respect to Florida State, they were in the top 5, but it was Miami. I mean, from a 3-year stretch, 88, 89, 90, I mean, the only national champs were, I mean, Notre Dame, or no, it's been 87 to 89. The national champs were Notre Dame or Miami. And in 1990, it was the tie. That was the year they had the tie between Colorado and Georgia Tech, correct? I believe it was in 1990. So, and the reason Miami didn't win it in 1990s because Notre Dame beat them, right? I mean, so that played a big role in it. Notre Dame getting a championship is going to give Pete Bavacqua and the Notre Dame leadership, especially if they can keep just being in the playoffs every year for the next 3-4 years. You've got that title. It's going to make them a much more prominent team when it comes to a prominent negotiating position when your new TV contract comes up here in a few years as well. That's another factor that looks from a money standpoint too, Trev. And then, of course, the benefits of now, like there's a lot of people that think that you're going to get pushed out of the playoff or pushed into a conference, and when the new playoff comes in a couple of years, when they redo because there's only this year, next year left on the 12-year deal, 12-team playoff, and then they're going to negotiate it again. Well, like, we just won a championship. You're not going to force us out now. You're not going to force us into doing something. You know what I mean? And so that's another thing that factors into this too, is Notre Dame now has all the bargaining power when it comes to the conference is trying to force them into a conference when the next bout of playoff expansion comes.
Yeah, another aspect of big picture as well is not only is there going to be an influx of money, you're already starting to see a difference in the talent that Notre Dame's starting to attract in the transfer portal. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? They got a nickel corner in Devontae Smith from Alabama. They got Malachi Fields, a premier receiver from Virginia. They just got a defensive tackle from Louisville, right? Like, the list continues to go on and on and on. You know, I mean, Jalen Stroman was an NFL draft prospect, a high NFL
day
draft
2
prospect,
guy, yeah,
before he got hurt, right? And so you're already starting to see what kind of talent Notre Dame is attracting because of, like, I see stuff on Twitter all the time about, look at how much coverage like Chris Burgess was getting, not just because he's a fantastic talent, but the team that he's committed to won on a walk-off field goal, and the video was of him watching that happen. So it all ties into the more coverage, the more exposure, and we're talking about a team that already gets some of the best exposure in all of college football is now going to get more exposure for more people to see them across the country. So it's all really exciting stuff. One of the things for me too, I don't know if we were ready to switch over to kind of like the micro view here.
Yeah, let's go.
But for me, it's, the massive opportunity in front of Notre Dame outside of, winning the national championship and all the money that's going to come in is the opponent that you have in front of you, you haven't beaten since 1936. Now, you're going to hear a lot of Ohio State fans throw that number out saying you haven't beat us since before World War II, which is a fact. Mind you, they've played 6 times since then over 89 years. So it's not like Ohio State is, 90-1 against Notre Dame in that time span, right? It's just
This isn't what was going on with Michigan, where they had won 14 out of 15 games, but they played every single year,
Right.
except the one year that Michigan was like, no, we want no part of that.
Right. Right. But they, to me, Notre Dame has an opportunity to right the ship against another opponent that they have yet to conquer in my lifetime. Right. I mean, the first Notre Dame Ohio State game I watched was the '05 Fiesta Bowl. And they lost 34-20. And the next game was the 2015 well, technically 2016, but the 2015 season Fiesta Bowl. And they lost that game 44-28. And then obviously we know what happened in 22 and 23. So Notre Dame has the opportunity to right the ship and not only get back onto the national stage and be the top dog in college football, but they have the opportunity to do it again against a team that they have not beaten in a very, very long time. Right? Because the first narrative was against Georgia. You haven't beaten that SEC team. You didn't beat Georgia in 17. You didn't beat them in 19. You haven't won the Sugar Bowl and can't tell you how long. But, now you get the opportunity on the biggest stage that there is in college football to right the ship against a team that has had your number since 1936 in the matchups that you've played, right? So for me, I think that just adds to the micro view of what Notre Dame has in front of them and the opportunity that they have to get a win in the Natty, Ryan.
Well, Trev, one of the things that I've said for the last several years, you've heard me say it before you were on the show and you used to listen to the show, and you've heard me say it since you've been on the show, is for Notre Dame, before you can start talking about being the national champions, you've got to become the best team in the North. And Michigan was ahead of them for a small period of time. And then now Michigan's kind of fallen back down to who they are. And you could argue Penn State to a degree was ahead of them, because even though I felt a lot of years Penn State was overrated, they've got a Cotton Bowl victory in recent years. They have a Rose Bowl victory in recent years, and they beat Washington a few years ago, something Notre Dame hadn't done. Yeah, Notre Dame had, we have more playoff appearances than you. Yeah, and you got killed in both of them. I'm pretty sure Penn State could have got killed if they would have made the playoffs too. You know what I mean? And now you beat Penn State, and you've got a chance to beat Ohio State. I just think it's very interesting, that when you look at this matchup, that what I've said is, if you want to be the best team in the country, you've got to be the best team in your region first, right? And so for Georgia, what did that mean? That meant we got to beat Bama. We want to be the best team in college football. We got to beat Bama. And for Bama, it was what? It was, okay, we got to beat LSU and Florida. Because remember, in the decade before Nick Saban showed up, Florida had won two titles. LSU had won two titles. So from 04, 05, 06, 07, 08. So in the 5 years before Nick Saban won his first title, 4 of those titles had been won by SEC teams. The only exception being USC in 05. Right? And so when you look at it, Trev, it's like, okay, they had to beat LSU and Florida to win a title. Well, what did they do in each 09? They beat both of them. They beat LSU at regular season. They beat Florida in the SEC title game. Well, then, look, Clemson wants to become a national champion. Well, okay, you got to become the best team in your conference, and you got to beat your in-state rival. They finally did. They started beating Florida State, started beating South Carolina. Okay, well, now you got to beat Bama. And first time they played, they lost. Next 2 times, Clemson won a national championship. Right? So that's what you've got to do. Georgia wanted to become the best team in the country. So what do they have to do? You better learn how to beat Alabama first. And it took Kirby Smart a lot of tries to do that, and he finally did that, and it led to them winning 2 national championships. And so, although they didn't play Bama the second year he won the title, correct? They only played Bama the first year. The second year they won a title, they beat LSU in the SEC title game. They didn't play Bama in the regular season, but they did beat them in the championship game in 2021.
Yep.
And so, that's what they had to do. Well, now you're Notre Dame, and you're trying to become the best team in the country, and you've got to prove that you're even the best team in the North. And it's just very poetic that I've held that stance. And for Notre Dame to win a title, they will not only have to beat 1, not 2, but 3 teams from the Big Ten to win a championship. Indiana in round 1, 3 top 10 Big Ten teams. And traditional Big Ten teams, not some team they got in the transfer portal, from the Pac-12, but 3 traditional Big Ten teams from the North, the Northeast, Midwest type of region. And I think that's also very poetic. And for Ohio State, it's Okay, well, you've got this team kind of nipping at your heels. They're starting to beat you for some recruits. They're starting to, put up some big wins. They're starting to look like you in a lot of ways. You need to beat them and kind of hold them off and still prove that you're the best team in the North. Beat Penn State, Notre Dame this year, go out and beat Michigan next year. And look, if Ohio State wins a title, there may be some Ohio State crazies, and people in Michigan are going to say this. Nobody else cares if they lost to Michigan if they win the national championship. Just like
No.
no one with a brain is really going to care that Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois if they beat Ohio State. No one's going to care about that. And so for Notre Dame, that's a big part of this, Trevor, like you said, is this is going to be used. And why does that matter? It's bragging rights, but what's the other thing it matters for, Trevor? Recruiting. Not just high school kids, but portal kids as well. To where, here's what y'all have to understand. To get elite players, you need to do one of two things. One, you have to pay them more money than anybody else is willing to pay them in today's era. It's number one. Or two, you got to pay them a lot, but they see you as a place they can go win a championship and be developed for the NFL. I'm confident. I'm not 100% certain of this, but from what I've been told, I'm kind of certain of this. People talk about how Ohio State bought a championship. Like, first of all, Notre Dame fans can't say that about anybody because Notre Dame's portal guys did not come to school for free. Some of them might have, but I know for a fact that several of them got money to come here. I'm not saying it's the primary reason they picked them, but that's my point. But what I'm saying is I'm confident, not 100% certain, but confident that Notre Dame did not offer Caleb Downs the highest amount of money of any school that he was looking at. From what I'm told, they were not his top offer. They offered enough combined with all the other things that Ohio State could offer him. NFL development, playing for a championship, things along those lines. And so they were able to get him. If Ohio State was 8-4 last year and had been 8-4 every year for the previous 10 years, the only way they were going to get Caleb Downs is if they offered him way more money than anybody else. Right? That's what this brings to you. High school recruiting. Notre Dame is way more competitive in NIL than people think. And it's not about whether or not you can buy players. It's about whether or not you can get buy-in from the players that you buy. And that's the difference. When guys are going to Ole Miss, they're going to Ole Miss because Ole Miss offered them more money than anybody else. Let's be honest about that. You don't see the same buy-in, which is why they lose 3 football games. And we've seen that from some guys at Alabama, if we're being honest. We saw that with some guys at Tennessee this past year, if we're being honest. The reason that Ohio State and Notre Dame are able to get some of these guys to come in and play the way they've played is because they're like, yeah, I'm getting paid, but I know that there's something bigger here for me than just getting paid. They understand this school offers me a chance to win a championship. This school offers me an opportunity to be developed at an elite level. This school offers me an opportunity to be a high NFL draft pick. That is a big reason why these schools are getting a lot of these top high school kids and why they're getting some other guys. I mean, look, there's some guys that Damon Wilson was a guy that Ohio State thought they were going to get out of high school, and Georgia just offered him more money. So he goes to Georgia. Well, guess what? He's sitting at home right now watching Ohio State play. Notre Dame's got plenty of stories like that where guys took more money to go play for him. I don't want to mention any names of guys that might be playing at Oklahoma or Alabama, but the reality is that there were guys that did that. Well, now they're sitting at home watching Notre Dame play for a championship. Next time that happens, they may think a little bit harder about it because now Notre Dame could offer that should they win this game. It also allows them to have a little bit more success against Ohio State. Now, they've already started to have more success against Ohio State in certain areas. Kingston Viliama-Asa is a guy that they beat Ohio State for. There's been several guys that they beat them for. But when you talk about some of those positions where they can't beat Ohio State, like I said, it'd be nice to get 1 or 2 of those Ohio State receivers over the next few years.
Man.
Well, you go out and win a championship, and now you can say, look, we want to win another one of these, and we need a guy like you because, man, we had a hard time stopping that Jeremiah Smith kid in the championship game. We need a guy like you, to help us get over that hump. Those things all help. And if you can do that, then you're going to have an opportunity, to win some more of those battles. And that's where you get can you sustain, or are you Auburn, where you get there once and then you're not really relevant again for the next 15 years? Are you we've seen teams like that, right? LSU wins in 19 and they really haven't been a legit contender since, and there's plenty of teams like that. Or is this like, okay, we're here to stay? And Notre Dame is in a position where what they're offering financially and opportunities for players to build up their brand as well as their get great education and all that allows them to show anyone, look, there's no excuse not to come here now. None. There's no excuse because, hey, can't win a championship, Notre Dame. Well, that's off the list. Can't be a high draft pick. That's off the list. You can't pay me as much as other people. Well, that's off the list. And if you can win this game, it gives you that opportunity to do that. So, I mean, there's a lot of big picture things at stake here. And that's true for both teams, but especially for Notre Dame because they're not perceived to be on the same level as Ohio State. If Notre Dame would have won a title last year, would they have had a better shot to get Caleb Downs to come play next to Xavier Watts this year? Who knows? Who knows? We don't know because they were playing Oregon State in Sun Bowl last year.
Right. Yeah, no, it completely opens the door to getting those higher top recruits. I put out an article today just around the recruiting comparison, and like the numbers don't lie, right? From a recruiting perspective. Now, obviously, you have guys playing above what their initial caliber rating was, but Riley Leonard is another kid that Notre Dame kind of outdueled Ohio State for, right? And so you go through and you look at that, and Notre Dame is slowly closing the gap. They haven't closed it yet. They're getting close, but a win in the national championship, back to the big picture, it would severely increase their odds at closing that gap completely. Absolutely.
So, Trevor, obviously, a final piece, and I do think this is probably my personal favorite, is it kills the narrative about Notre Dame. Because now when there will be people at ESPN that still say what they want to say about Notre Dame. It'll kill the narrative about Notre Dame, and it'll kill the narrative about the type of quote unquote athlete you need to win championships. And this is something that's bothered me for a long time. You know this. When I was had a chance to speak with a couple people about this down at our get together the day of the game. There's always been this narrative. Well, Notre Dame can't recruit the top athletes. Okay, explain what you mean by that. Well, look, Southern athletes, kids from the South. That blah, 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 blah. They don't want to go to school. They don't want to do this. They don't want to do that. Well, who are you talking about here? Highly ranked recruits. Well, Notre Dame gets lots of big time, highly ranked offensive linemen. Notre Dame gets lots of well, no, but like the athletes, who are you talking about? You know who they're talking about. And it's always been a lie. It's always been a prejudice and an assumption that people think, well, because you look like this and because you're from a public school in this part of the country, you're probably like a 2-3 who's really not that smart, doesn't care about education, and you're just going somewhere to play football, and I ain't go to school for school kind of guy. That's always been false. I mean, Myron Rolle didn't go to Florida State because they gave him the easiest path to become a brain surgeon, which he is, by the way. He picked Florida State because that's where he wanted to go to be developed in football, and he did what he needed to do to still become a brain surgeon, right? There are kids like that, but there's kids from the North like that. There has always been a lot of players that were from the South, that looked a certain way, that were athletic, that cared about education. But the difference is their chosen profession was they wanted to be a professional football player. And other schools offered them a better opportunity for that. I know plenty of guys that went to Florida and played for Urban Meyer who also were 3.5s and got 2 degrees and did some good things, right? I mean, it kills that narrative. Not so Notre Dame can recruit those guys in the future, but to say they already have. They already have recruited those guys. Like you can look like Jeremiah Love and be a phenomenal student who cares about education. And I've been told for 20 years you can't, and I hate it, and I get sick of it. You can't be fast and actually care about education. Yeah, you can. And to me, that's a big thing. That whole, well, you can't recruit to Notre Dame because of academics. What does that mean? Well, what does that mean? Top athletes are stupid and don't care about – it's always been a BS narrative. Reggie Bush could have easily gotten into Notre Dame. But if you were coming out of high school in the mid-2000s, are you going to want to play for USC or Notre Dame? Forget all the other stuff. Who gives you the best chance to do all the things you want to do and what you want to do professionally? That's like saying you have an opportunity to go to Notre Dame business school or go to some, school in your state that has a very low-ranked business school and you're going to pick this one for why would you pick the other one if you could afford, but you got a full ride to both? Where are you going to go? You're going to go to Notre Dame. Why? Because they give you the best opportunity to maximize your abilities, your education, to then go get the best opportunities you have in your chosen field. And that's a narrative that has really pissed me off for a long time. And I'll just say, at the very best, it's prejudiced. And we know what it is at the very worst. And I think this destroys that narrative if Notre Dame can win. I actually think, because even now we're still hearing it. Well, Notre Dame's not the most talented team, but they're real smart. We're already hearing all the buzzwords. They're a really smart football team. They play hard. They're coached really well. We're hearing all the buzzwords. They're not the most talented, but insert, statement about how they're just really smart. I don't know about you, but Jeremiah Love is going to be one of the best athletes on the field on Saturday. I don't know what I'd be willing to bet you that if they raced, Leonard Moore could beat any of Ohio State's cornerbacks in a race. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't mean Ohio State's not fast. They are. They have great athletes. But this is an athletic football team, and I think it kills that narrative that Notre Dame wins just because their kids are smart. They may not be the fastest, but they're just really smart. And it says, no, they are very talented, and they are smart, and they care about their education. And you can do both. And a lot of kids choose to do both. And even kids who don't go to Notre Dame still choose to get a great education. It's just they felt that there were better opportunities for them from a football standpoint in that regard. And I'm looking forward to that dying. And people will still say it, but now you can look at them and laugh even harder. That's what I think a game like this, because like you've already heard it, Trev. You've heard all the buzzwords about this Notre Dame team and how they stack up athletically to Ohio State, which then assumes that every kid that's a great athlete at Ohio State doesn't care about going to class. And not every kid at Ohio State's a great athlete. It's Cardell Jones.
Right. I mean, look, man, the thing that's frustrating the most for me is you take a Jeremiah Love, you take Leonard Moore, you take Christian Gray, you take Jadarian Price, you take Jaden Greathouse, and you put them on any other team that's not Notre Dame, and they're praised for their athleticism.
Correct.
You put them in a blue and gold uniform, and I heard it after Notre Dame beat Penn State. It's like, on paper, they shouldn't have won, but this team just continues to find ways to win. And it's like,
well, based on what?
I know. And that's what's so frustrating is like they're trying to paint this narrative that really any angle that they can come from, that Notre Dame isn't a good, talented, athletic, fast, long football team, they will. And now the new one is they've kind of gotten backed into this corner. I'm talking national pundits here. They've gotten backed into this corner of, well, Notre Dame's playing for a national championship. They beat IU, Georgia, and Penn State to get there. They're about to face Ohio State. So we can't say that they're just not good. So now let's start tuning into it's just this Cinderella story narrative, that it's just a bunch of gritty, hard-nosed, intelligent football players. It's like, hey, listen, like Notre Dame's team isn't full of great NFL player, but it's not full of a bunch of Danny Amendolas that are just right. They make the smart heads up play. Sure. And like, look, there's a lot of talent here. But like I said, you go put any one of those players that I mentioned, you go put Bryce Young, you go put Charles Jagasaw, you go put any of those guys, you go put a Don Shula,
Jalen Sneed, Drake Bowen, Aiden Ausberry. Exactly.
You go put any one of those guys in scarlet and gray, you put any one of them in the Alabama Crimson, you put any one of them in the Georgia red and black, and they're the best athletes. This is why Georgia recruits the best athletes. So I'm with you, man. The narrative needs to die, and it needs to die quickly.
It's like my guy I Am 10 says, but Trevor, they are tough and gritty and smart, and they are. That it's not to say that they aren't. It's to say that they are that, and they are this. Because look, Ohio State's got plenty of tough, gritty guys as well. They don't talk about that though. Caleb Downs is one of the most physical safeties you're going to see. But, what a great athlete. Yeah, he's also really smart, and he's also really tough. That's the point. And that's what drives me nuts about it, to be honest with you. I'm looking forward to that narrative dying a very hard death. And so those are some of the benefits as well that go into what's at stake for Notre Dame. But, and then the final one is for Marcus Freeman. You get to prove that, hey, you're capable of doing this at Notre Dame. Look, Notre Dame is one of those schools, Trevor, where I kind of feel like there's some schools where, like, as long as you're not an idiot, you should be able to win there to some degree. Like, unless you're just a bad coach, you should be able to win 9 games a year at Texas. I mean, unless you're just a bad coach, you should be able to win 8, 9 games a year at Bama, minimum. There are some schools, and then if you're a good coach, you can win a championship, and you don't have to. But you don't have to be you don't have to be a great coach to win at LSU. Matter of fact, in LSU's last 3 titles, only one of those guys was even considered a really good coach or better. And nobody thinks Ed Orgeron's a great coach. Nobody thinks Les Miles is a great coach, but it's LSU. You can recruit that kind of talent and all those type of things. There are some schools, though, where you need the right coach to win. Michigan's one of those. Notre Dame's one of those. But if you are the right kind of coach, you can flat out win there at an elite level. And I think that's what Marcus Freeman has a chance to. He's actually already kind of shown that. And if they play a competitive 4-quarter game, that will be an even stronger argument. Because trust me, there's a lot of national people just praying that Ohio State blows Notre Dame out. So then they can say, see, Penn State wasn't that good. Georgia wasn't that good. Notre Dame's not that good. I mean, you can listen to the guy in the top hat on ESPN whose name I don't even want to say right now. I'm so disgusted by it. And he'll say some dumb stuff like that. And, that dies a very hard death if Notre Dame wins this football game. That's the other part of it, too. You had to beat the best team in the SEC. You had to beat the best team in the Big Ten in order to get to this championship, if you're able to win one. And so I think those are all things that factor into what's at stake for Notre Dame. And for Notre Dame fans, it's like things that, if they win this game, things that piss Notre Dame fans off for a long time will now just make you smile. When they start to say the thing, oh, you can't do. I mean, New Year's Six bowl thing is dead. Championship drought is gone. I mean, there's literally nothing they can throw at you except, oh, well, you're independent. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I know, and we love that. Oh, your kids have to go to class. Yeah, and can still win championships. You know what I mean? Like there's anything they throw at you now, you just laugh at. And I think that's a big thing. But we're going to get more into the actual breakdown of the game next, Trevor. We'll actually dive more into this matchup. But I did think as we always do, we wanted to kind of start off with this conversation. And I'm going to move that last bit to the end of this breakdown, Trev. So we'll do that. I think it's going to fit better there. So that's part 2 of today's show, folks. Just kind of looking at what's at stake here for Notre Dame in this football game. Part 2 is going to be, we're going to take a dive into the Ohio State Buckeyes. But before we do, folks, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review. And if you have not done so, sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com.